So this is what we're making, a hinged ring with a hairpin clip. So that it opens like this so you can take it off. Our material is sterling 1.5 thick, 5.5 wide. Our chenier is 2 millimeters outside diameter with a 1 millimeter inside hole. So get your ring size using an existing ring or a ring sizer. Measure the inside diameter using the knife edge of your calipers. Add the thickness of your material, multiply by 3.14. Now, if you were making a regular ring, that would be the exact length that you cut it. But because we're using chenier, and the way I'm making the ring is with a double piece of chenier on top with a single hinge on the bottom, each one of these being 2 millimeters, so that's 6 millimeters that you need to subtract from the length of your ring blank. So cut that to length, and if you're going to texture it or put marks on it, you need to anneal it, put the marks on it. If you put a lot of marks on it, you need to anneal it again and then make it into as perfect a ring as you can. And you need to file these ends perfectly flat. So mark your line at a proper 90-degree angle. Saw, don't use shears. And then file using your number 2 cut flat hand file. Nice and flat, and check with your square to make sure that it is square, both ends, and we'll anneal and form it. So just heat your material until it's a dull red. And this blue point here is actually the hottest part of your flame, so you can put that on the middle. And when it's a dull red like this, take the heat away. And quench it in water. So dry the middle. I'm going to hallmark it now because my hallmark stamps are flat. And now we're going to use our rawhide hammer and form this around our ring mandrel. So we're going to make this as round as we can without soldering it. I'll show you another little trick where we can just hammer it into a wooden block using our rawhide hammer, and we just hammer it in this way using the ring mandrel. So you can see it's starting to form it fairly well. So just use your hammer and your fingers and the mandrel and get it as round as you can with the ends fairly close. And you recall that we're going to solder hinges in here that are 2 millimeters wide. So if you're somewhere between 1.5 and 1 3/4 millimeters, it'll be perfect, because then there'll be enough tension to hold the tubing. Now, a little trick would be using a thick wall ring like this. If it's almost round and you don't want to solder it and hammer it up to make it perfectly round, what you can do is you can put the ring into your dapping block or your douging block, flip it over, and what will happen is it'll slightly polish the outside edge, but it'll make it perfectly round. But once you have your ring nice and round with the proper gap, hold it against your bench pin and file the inside edges so that they're perfectly flat, because you may have deformed it when you're hammering it. So just make sure that it's as flat as possible. Because to get a good solder join, you have to have a good fit. Now I'm going to use my chenille holder, and cut 3 joints 2 millimeters wide. So this little gap here to the inside of this is 2 mil. This is a Bergian cutter, and it has a vernier out here so that you can actually set it without measuring it. Now once you cut through, don't lift your saw blade out, because if you do that, normally it'll flip that little piece across the room. So you just turn it, tip it out on your bench peg, and then cut the rest, 3 of them. Now at this point, take your 1 millimeter drill bit and run it through each one of these, just to get a little bit of flashing off. You could do it, you could put this in your handpiece and run it up, but you stand a real good chance of drilling your finger if you do. So don't do that, just do this by hand. It'll come off really easily. We just want them clean before we solder. Now we're going to put our knuckles, which is what they're called, in place. And then we're going to solder 2 on one side and 1 on the other side. Okay, for the first one, what I'm going to do is just put 2 of my knuckles in, because we don't want to solder them together. And I'm just going to put flux on the side where the solder is going to go. Hard solder, 1 piece at each spot. And then what I'll do is, after I solder these, I'll cut another piece the exact size to fit on the other side, and then I'll solder that separately. And you can see I've got this hanging on my third hand, and it's to keep the hinge bits up from the inside, because if they're down on the inside of the ring, they're going to be uncomfortable. So just warm up the ring. We want to dry the flux out. And push our solder into place. You can see I'm just using a propane torch, so we need a fair amount of heat. I'm concentrating mostly on the ring, and our flux will go clear, and then if the solder doesn't flow within a few seconds, turn the heat up. So there it flowed. Beautiful. Now we'll quench it and set up the next one. So now we're going to measure the width of this knuckle in here, just slightly under 2 mil. So I'm going to file and then fit until we have a nice snug join. So you can see I have my flux and solder in place. And once again we're going to just warm this up until everything's ready to solder. And I'm going to concentrate my heat on this side of the ring because I don't want the solder to flow anywhere except on that joint. So we just heat it up until the solder just starts to flow, and then we back away, and that way it stays where it's supposed to stay. Now I'm going to spread this apart a little bit and put a steel wire through. So that everything will be held in place, and now I can go back and I can heat this. These will all solder 100%. Then I can quench it, take the wire out, put it together, and then run the drill through this through these knuckles. But this way everything is held in place and I can solder it. So just a little more flux right where we're soldering on those 3 spots. If you don't keep them separate, what happens is the knuckles fuse together. So this is the medium tip on the easy torch. Just heat this side, and when the solder flows and looks nice, then I'll switch to the other side. I'm happy with that. Lovely. Quench it and take the steel wire out. And you always take the steel wire out before you pickle it, because if you put the steel in the pickle with this, it'll turn everything pink. So now we're going to pickle it to get all of the oxides and the flux off, and then we'll assemble it. Come out of the pickle, dry it off, have a look at your solder joins, make sure they're perfect. Squeeze it together so that the joints or the knuckles line up. Drill through with your 1mm drill bit.